Welcome to the Jumping Bean Magic Collective podcast. I'm Linda Lewis, founder of the collective, here with my co-host, Heather Manwaring. We started this podcast to dive deep into the creative experience. We explore themes related to the creative path and showcase other creators' journeys. If you want to know more about the collective and our mission of connecting creatives with meaningful work, please check out our website and follow us on Instagram. We'd love to connect with you. Hello! This is the first and pilot episode of the Jumping Bean Magic Collective podcast.
Whoop, whoop.
I am Linda Lewis, and Heather Manwaring is with me in the podcast studio.
Heyo. Happy to be here.
So if you don't know what Jumping Bean Magic Collective is, we are a collective of all disciplines of artists and designers from all over. Anyone is welcome to join that is a creative. We'll talk more about that. And today we're going to talk about how Jumping Bean got started, what Jumping Bean is, and our creative journeys, myself and Heather. We'll try not to get too long-winded with this, but we are
pretty
talkers.
Hard with us. Yeah, it's pretty hard with
pretty
us.
Hard.
Those excessive people.
Thank goodness for editing. So where should we start?
I think you should start with the inception of Jumping Bean and your process through it and where you are now and things like that.
Okay. So Jumping Bean came up really during the pandemic. I was looking around at all of my extremely creative friends, a lot of them in corporate jobs, as I was at the time in 2020. And a lot of us just felt very creatively stuck and either some golden handcuffs or we're just not really making ends meet as a creative and had to subsidize with a lot of other types of work. So I made a quick list of all the creatives I thought could be and would be involved in such a thing. And at the time, I just thought I'd get everybody on Zoom and talk about what personal projects we have going on. A lot of people in 2020 was the first time people had time to do personal projects because they were working from home. So just getting that commute time back, people were able to take up new hobbies and new creative pursuits. I made that list and then I just sat on it and I moved to Hawaii and ended up having a kid and getting married and buying a house.
No biggie.
And 4 years went by.
Your life stayed the same with a baby, right?
Yeah, exactly the same. So 3.5 years after I made that list, I was up late feeding said baby and this silly name came to me and I just felt really sparkly about it. And I remember calling Heather the next day and being like, I really want to do this thing. And I had written our manifesto, which you can find on our website. And it was the powers that combine can create anything. The powers that I can combine with the talents that I know and the talent pool that I have adjacent to me. If we all put our heads together, we would be unstoppable. And we could do work that we wanted to do. And so many creatives are doing work that they don't really want to do. And in some ways are being really exploited because these huge corporations don't really care about creativity, not in the pure sense of the word. And they certainly don't care about self-expression. They care about making money. And sometimes you can feel real expression through big corporate design. Sometimes it's usually
rare,
when it's rare. And it's usually when somebody has a vision that they get to carry all the way through. And that autonomy is rare. In a big corporate environment, it's usually designed by committee. So I just started putting together an event, like a launch party. And Heather came up.
It was so fun.
And we hosted a launch party for, I think, about 10 or 15 people.
I think it was closer to 15.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And Heather took great headshots of everybody, also on our website. of the members that are currently still with us. And that was fall of last year, so 2023. And in the midst of that, we got notice, myself and my husband got notice, we were relocating abroad to the Netherlands for his work.
Moving to Amsterdam, baby.
So and then it became an online collective, which I think in some regard it was always going to be, because I
Yeah,
wanted
with the
to have it open.
international. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to have it open to people I knew that had moved abroad and people I knew had moved across country. I went to Savannah College of Art and Design. I still have friends from that world. So the launch party happened in Portland, Oregon, where we were currently living. There lives in Reno area and came up. Over time, we've slowly grown to 10 members, and from all different walks of life. We have an architect, we have several interior designers, because that's my background. We have several graphic designers. Heather's a photographer, among other things. We'll talk more about that.
Among like 50 other things.
Yes. And my background's in interior design, but I also have a ton of other creative hobbies and pursuits. Serial kind of ideal launcher of entrepreneurial things that we're still percolating. So yeah, we ended up doing monthly calls for the first half of the year. Each one of those calls would have a theme. So we would pursue or talk through, discuss themes like perfectionism or themes like freeze and flow. Things that are universal to the creative experience. And that's how this podcast came about, was saying, hey, we could get a broader audience for these discussions. We can bring members on to focus in on their journeys and really showcase their work and bring the
And
public
because you and
along
I
for the
just have
ride.
a lot to say.
We have a lot to say.
We have a lot to say. We have a lot of medicine to share, a lot of gifts to give. So yeah, it just seemed like this is such a good format for just sharing those ideas, sharing the discussions on topics and things that are really important to us. So it just like makes so much sense to have a podcast.
It makes so
for
much
you and I.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Well, I love hearing about this because I actually had no idea you were sitting on this for so long.
Oh,
That you
really?
had put, yeah, I don't think I knew that. Or
Yeah.
if you told me, I forgot or something, but that you'd been sitting on this for a while, and then your life happened and
Yes.
all that stuff. But I didn't realize how long this had been. So it's cool. I really like hearing about that.
Yeah, and it's definitely taken a different
oh,
form. I think I thought it would be more diplomatic and not something I would have to lead. And then when I kind of woke up to it 3.5 years later, I was like, oh, I have to lead this.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Yep.
It needs a leader. It needs somebody who has the vision and holds the vision. Because if it's just a group that gets together every now and then, it's going to fizzle. It's not going to have any energy behind it.
Agreed. Well, I'm glad you came to that conclusion, because that's just like the right thing.
I was definitely, in 2020, I was definitely like, I don't want to lead.
Yeah.
I don't want to
I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, same.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of resistance to that kind of stuff too, so I get that.
Yeah. And in my corporate career, I was also doing a lot of coaching of creatives. So one of my roles was design operations manager, which a lot of people don't really know what the heck that is. I didn't either when I went into it.
Yeah.
It's somebody who handles a lot of processes and is chief of staff to the design director. So design directors usually come up through very creative paths, and they're not people managers necessarily. Like, some of them are just straight up artists.
Yeah.
So it needs somebody who has a little bit more of the left brain skills, and I've always been a hybrid.
And you have so many of those.
Yeah, I've always been a little bit more on that. Maybe not more on that side, but definitely split brain. Yeah. And so I took some of those roles, and my favorite part of those roles, because doing the Excel sheets was not my favorite part, but I can do them. But my favorite part of those was actually working with the designers and sometimes hiring the young designers straight out of school and really giving them view on what their creative career can be inside and out of corporate world. Because I had also worked in small business. Yeah. So this also, Heather and I talked about, how much coaching do we want to do on here? We have both been
Totally.
personal and spiritual coaches and relationship coaches. Heather's still doing that work. And I will probably get back into it at some point when I don't have a toddler. And we are good at it. So we will be asking people if they want coaching, but a lot of the time we'll probably launch into that a little bit as well. So tell
Perfect.
me about your,
Goodness.
I know it's like a really broad question.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, I mean, I have to start at the very beginning because I was born to two very creative parents and then introduced to a third parent figure very early on who my stepmom had a very prestigious creative career, and I always felt pretty drawn to her work, and beauty in general has always been kind of inside me as what I look for. But then like my dad was an artist, and then my mom doesn't draw or do any of the hands-on thing, but she's so creative. She's an incredible writer. She thinks creatively. She's always been an entrepreneur type who has created her own thing in the world. And so I was just surrounded by creatives and, in many different facets. I think it just gave me such an early introduction to creativity and what it can look like, and the many different ways that it can take form. Like you can have a job and be really successful in your thing and build a following and have like loyal fans, and then you can struggle immensely and not be able to pay the bills, and then you can build a six-figure business. There was just a lot that I was uh, exposed to as a little one, and for a long time I didn't think I wanted to be an artist. It was just one of the things that I just kept getting over and over. It's just so hard to make money. It's so hard. It's so hard. So don't do it. Like da 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 da. But I always felt very drawn to doodling on my on my like schoolwork, and drawing in my free time, and studying what I found beautiful. I would like stick my nose in things that just really called to me, or that I was attracted by. Um, but also like my childhood was just really hard. Like it was just not a place that really paradoxically didn't create a lot of space for creativity for me. Like um there was a lot of like lack of self-expression that was possible, and just that there wasn't a huge value on that side of things, at least in my experience. And so it kind of sent me on a journey of having to kind of learn on my own in a lot of ways how to express myself and work through the blocks I had around being a creative person. And I think I turned 18 or 19 or something like that, and I started painting. I was really dealing with a lot. I had ended a relationship with my dad, and I just needed a lot of space to myself, and there was really no other way for me to express myself other than through paint. And so I would really lock myself in my room and just paint, and I would paint all night to express myself and find an outlet for these things that I was feeling that I didn't have words for. And that was really the start of it. It felt for me where I was really prolific in my creative production and expression and feeling. And then I moved out of parents' houses, and they had moved somewhere. They had moved to Carson City, like the Nevada region, and I followed not into Nevada but to Tahoe, and that's really where my creativity like exploded because I just felt like I had a lot more space. I was living with really creative roommate, and it just started really coming out of me where I found live art things and places who wanted to feature my art, and I found photography, and I really started having ideas for digital art, and so I would ask people to be in front of my camera, and that's really where my photography journey started, was when I lived in Tahoe. I mean, it's just such a beautiful place, and anyone who's been to Tahoe will know that it's just there's something really special about it, that inspires so much. And then I I think that the most pivotal thing in my life was a trip to do ayahuasca. And I guess just a little backstory if no one knows what ayahuasca is, it's a really, really intense, feminine, spirited plant medicine. And there's so much around it. You have to be so intentional. And I think it really needs to be done by a shaman who has been steeped in the lineage. So we found a place that had a indigenous lineage and shamans, and we did it right. And it was so profound because my experience of ayahuasca was that it was extremely visual, and the visuals were absolutely stunning, where it just called me out and forward and helped me purge a lot of the traumas and things that I really wasn't aware of, and just helped clear things out enough for me to realize I had a calling that was waiting for me. And I mean, that is a long ass story, but essentially it's taken me all over the US and basically was the initiation of my business and learning all the things of how to build a business and all of the struggles that come with that, and how to make clear what I'm doing. And it's just, sometimes it's really hard because I do work with the feminine energy, and you just don't always know what's going to happen or what someone's going to receive or what emotion's going to come up or whatever. But it felt like it exploded my creative expression. So it was okay. I love painting. I love photography. I love working with people. The one-on-one work to me is so special, and then what if someone doesn't want to be in front of the camera? So then I do just like one-on-one coaching without that? And what's that like? And then and I met Perry, and Perry is a teacher that both Linda and I have shared. And that was kind of the next round of ayahuasca. It felt just like taking a deep, hard look at these places, and the places where your ego gets in the way, and then your ideas for what it should look like get in the way. And then how do you just strip everything back to be with the pure essence of what I'm here to teach and what I'm here to create and be in the world? And that really deepened my creativity and how I show up. And so it's been really cool to see how my creations have evolved and matured and like become something different and transformed into something that really is so like divinely beautiful, instead of just like an expression of my pain or like, of identity, and so there's just so many layers to this, which is why it's so hard to just be like, what's your creative path like? Because I'm like, how long do you have and how many layers can we go through?
Right. And this is
But
why
yeah,
some people, you don't see the manifestation of their creative journey till they're 80, right? Some
well,
people
right.
go their whole lives until they've landed on the thing, right?
Totally. I'm like going on 10 years here of like going through layers and leaving stuff off and really distilling what I'm here for and learning what it is to fully express myself and what it really takes to run a business. And I'm still fucking learning that stuff. And I'm almost 10 years in, and I like I have work, but I don't really have a business yet to show for it in the way that I thought I would have 10 years ago. Because there's so many people who out there who were like, oh yeah, I made 100K in the first year of business. And I'm like, what even is that? So it's just, it's just for whatever reason, my path has been slower, harder, and I've just had a lot to work through before the purity of what I'm holding out in the world is clear, and
Yeah.
do I know why? No, but this is what it is. So I still feel like I don't have the full expression yet, but I'm getting closer every day where it's, I need to adjust that. And I'm letting go of this piece of story, belief system, or trauma that's been stuck, where it's now I can express that more cleanly, or, so building a website was a really big part of that, where it's, how do I just sit in my medicine and let it express itself and try not to get in the way. And I have a beautiful website now, which I'm really proud of. But then there's just always stuff that changes, and makes itself known, and then I adjust here and let that thing go. And so it's just like seeing it as like its own living, breathing entity that I am tending to and nurturing and mothering and listening to. And it's just, it's like, yeah,
Yeah, one
I
of
guess
the
that brings
challenges
us
with
that brings
yeah, I think one of the challenges with websites too is that you want to document the past, but you also want to keep moving forward. And
absolutely.
so a lot of that
Absolutely.
documentation is really hard to keep up with. You almost need somebody else to archive work.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so people, I mean, in general, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of people's actual creative expressions because
Yeah.
you're just seeing the stuff that they're showing
Yeah.
that they've given the light of day to, right? But
Yep.
there's no
Yeah.
creative person out there that doesn't have loads of uh, cutting room floor material.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have tens of thousands of photographs that no one's ever seen. You know,
Yeah,
It's-
yeah,
and paintings that I don't even know where they are anymore.
yeah.
I never documented them. They're just on in the wind. I don't have all of my work with me, but it's gotten me to the point where like, I really love what I create, and it's based in, you know, more divine co-creation and frequency work and energy and what I want more of in my life. That's just, it's coming through, and I kind of just get out of the way. But yeah. Yeah, and that has always been a struggle where it's like no one's seen all my work, so how will people know like what I am good at, all the stuff that I can do? And because I really have so many facets of creativity, and I'm so good at so many things. And my website was like, okay, I'm making more room for all of the things that I love doing. And that's coaching, photography, retreats, working with people, like this facet of photography and this facet of coaching. There's so much that I'm like, I'm finally just giving permission for all of it to exist and to, potentially overwhelm people and, and just be like, I've tried to niche before and I got bored. There's just so much in me. Like, why am I going to hold back because someone told me, or many, many someones told me that you have to niche to be successful.
Well, and a niche is just the same as a job title, right?
Yeah,
In the corporate world, it's the job title, and you become an apparel designer and you do XYZ part of the process of apparel design. And sometimes you're only the graphics part of the apparel design. Sometimes you're only the color part of the apparel design. And you get into that job description, those color designers are with loads of other skills,
skills.
talents,
Yeah,
interests,
yeah,
dreams, right? And they're amazing at what they do, but over time, there's almost no one that can find full creative fulfillment through just that channel.
totally.
And there's an expectation from the corporate creative world that
Yeah.
you should be perfectly happy moving up the ladder in one of those
In like
channels.
one tiny little box of creativity. It's like,
And yeah,
oh,
there's a lot of expectation placed on people, and they place that expectation on themselves as well.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and then they get kind of caught up in, well, I can't get out of this now. I've been in this role for so long. I only do this part of the process.
mm-hmm,
And so it's breaking people out of that to be like, but what actually lights you up? Like,
mm-hmm.
how do you want to spend your entire day on a Saturday without thinking about work if you're not too burnt out at work that you have any energy left, right? And that's a
Right.
little bit part of the problem too, is that um, the creative culture in corporations drains any of your creative energy, so you don't have any left over for yourself.
Right.
And
Right.
that, I mean, it drains your creative energy if you're in a niche on your own
Totally.
accord, right? This is what I've created my job description to be, and this is what people expect of me, and now I need to stay in that
Right.
because that's what's making me money, right?
Right. I mean, when I was living in New York, when I was really like first tapping into how much anger I was feeling, right? I had kept a cork on it until I got to New York and started a business and met a man and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, all this anger was coming out. So I was like, cool, my niche is I'm going to work with people on their anger. Like I took people out into nature where I found the most healing in space, and I held space for people to let it rip, and I took photos of that process, and it was, no one had ever heard of anything like that before. I really attached to that for the 3 years I was in New York. I would go on podcasts and all the stuff talking about anger and the importance of expressing this emotion, and then that was my niche. And then all of a sudden it just became, I quite literally got burnt out on it because there's so much more to the process than anger. Is,
Yeah.
what's under anger is so many things. You have desires under there, you have grief under there, you have things that need to transform under there. And so, I was lucky in some sense of the word that like the pandemic hit, because it really put a stop in that train, because I would have kept going, and probably killed myself. But it really asked me to look at what was underneath all that stuff and address the deeper things, right? And so it's like, oh, now, but like there was a part of me that was scared to let that go, because I was like known as the anger queen. Again, it's like if I put a cork on all the other ways that people express emotion, then I'm like unfulfilled and drained, and it just doesn't work. And so I'm like, I don't think. So, anyways, just talking about an example of trying to niche.
100%.
That
Yeah.
doesn't work for me. That doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. I don't think it works for most people. I mean,
Yeah.
you see people, they midlife crises or whatever, quarter life crises, whatever these things are. It's like, I went down this path. I went as far as I could go, and I did not find fulfillment here. Because I don't think any of us, we're all multifaceted, especially if you feel like you are a creative. And I think everyone is at
Everyone
their
is.
heart and soul a
Everyone
creative.
is. Everyone is.
But some people really find creativity in the left brain world as well, right?
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
creativity in those other types of, even the medical field, or even, there's all kinds of, like, creativity is not owned by creatives.
By artists. Yeah. Totally.
But that's why I've always said the jumping mean, if you identify as a creative, like, we'd love to have you, because you have unique skills and talents and interests that are going to bring something to the table that we don't have.
Or even if you don't identify as a creative, like I can't tell you how many people I meet who are like, I'm not creative, and then ask them some questions, and then they tell me all of the things that they're creative about, and I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah,
are you telling me
that's true.
that's not creative?
And when I say identify as a creative, it's just like, do you enjoy your creativity? Like, I mean, there's some people that just are like, like, I do XYZ, like, I have no interest in. But some people would more say, oh, I'm a hobbyist, or I'm a crafter, or I'm a, and like, by all means, come on. Like, we would love to have you. And even people who love to work with creatives from a support person perspective, like the operations managers, the project managers, the social media managers, the accountants, the lawyers, like, any of those people who really enjoy working adjacent and supporting creatives, again, very welcome.
Yeah, even the connectors like you just create so many connections that are so amazing, and where it just, your reach is so much wider because you're able to create the connections that you've created.
Yeah.
Too.
And I owe a lot of that to my corporate career, because I just worked in such a giant place that I interacted with so many people on a really regular basis. Because I don't know that I would have come by that completely naturally. Like, I am probably a little bit more introverted than that shows.
Yeah.
But I do really enjoy connecting people. Like, I really enjoy connecting like-minded people, or people who can share a project or share an idea. And that's where this came from, because that really does light me up.
Hell yeah.
But I think we have similar childhoods from a lot of our other conversations.
Definitely.
I had very creative parents as well. My mom was a theater major. My dad is a writer, and um, now journalist, and has written a couple books. And I think 4 or 5 other members of my family have writing degrees, either journalism
Oh,
or
wow.
creative writing. I can think of 4 of them off the top of my head. And what's interesting is it wasn't until just a few years ago that I was like, oh yeah, I'm a really good writer, because I didn't have that degree. So I start
That is so wild
comparing.
to me because your writing is so good.
Thank you.
Like,
But I like,
so good.
but you said you would hole up in your room and paint. Like I would hole up in my room and write.
Yeah.
Like I have my journals
Yeah.
dating back to like when I was 6 or 7 years old. And
Yeah.
that was my escape. That was my place to channel everything. Um,
Yeah.
and I'd also paint, but like those types of, and I went to design school, but like those types of putting pen to paper like had a lot more pressure for me. Like the
Mm.
visual arts had way more pressure. They still do. And so I didn't feel as like freely flowing there, where I could just look at a blank
Pressure.
canvas. Like I felt like it had to be done right.
Oh, I see. I see.
Whereas
Okay.
writing for me never felt like that. Writing for me felt
Gotcha.
like nobody's ever going to see this. I can just say whatever the fuck I want, and it's, sacrosanct. It's going to be mine. And it really
Yeah.
wasn't until working with Olivia, another mutual friend and coach,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
who is so beautifully expressed through writing.
Oh my God. Her
Um,
writing is amazing.
it's heart stopping. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I
Absolutely.
started, really reading her work, I was like, I write like this. Like, we have different styles,
Yeah.
but like, I'm like, I express like this. I
But you're
just don't share
capable.
it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I don't share this shit, but I like
Yeah.
definitely write it.
But it's in
Then,
you. Yeah. It's
yeah, but
in
it's in
you.
me. And then in working with her, I was like, oh, like, should I be sharing this? It's kind of like, huh, that's interesting. Like, do people do that?
Wow. What a
Like,
thought.
I kind of needed permission to do that. She was like, why don't you do something? I was like, okay. And then I just wrote this whole piece about what a loser I am. And it like triggered people so hard.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
But that idea of it sharing such a vulnerable and intimate piece of me, right?
Yeah.
Like this
Mm-hmm.
writing thing that I just
Sure.
did completely in secret, basically, for my whole life,
Yeah.
like
Wow.
was really like blew me open in a lot of ways.
Wow.
Honestly, in my mind, I thought everybody had a journal. I thought everybody was like at home writing about their feelings. Like I really did. I really just was
Yeah.
like,
I
this
mean,
is
I
what
definitely
everyone
was.
does. Right. And like a lot of my people do and did.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I've learned since
Like
that like
you
that
could
is not a
see I was like
universal
journaling on
experience.
mine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That is not a universal experience.
Right.
And also, even before working with Olivia and Perry and meeting you and kind of being in
Mm.
this other world where we all share our inside guts on the internet, even before that, just the way that the way that I processed my
Yeah.
childhood, processed trauma, processed. Uh, I'm writing a whole relationship course right now, so like kind of
I'm so excited for
rewired
that.
myself for connection and attachment.
Right.
Um, some with the help of guides, a lot on my own. Um, and I did 90% of that work through writing. And that's not going to be the medium for everybody, but it's
Yeah.
certainly my spot. But it's not my preference. I would love
Writing?
to be I would love to be a prolific visual artist. Like I would love that.
Wow.
And
That's
I'm
so
just
funny.
not. Yeah, I'm just not.
Wow.
But I have such a
Yeah.
I do paint and I do ceramics and I like, I knit and I do, that kind of more fine art. Like I think there will be an era in my life when I have a art studio, a home art studio, and I have like the ability to really,
That's a dream of mine.
yeah, like to really
Yeah.
be prolific at visual arts. I think the main, like beyond the
You're good at that. You're good
I
at it.
love them, and I do like have, especially like compositional,
Yeah.
like that is my thing. Like I
And
can
design,
compose my ass
yes,
off. Yeah. But
absolutely.
nobody ever taught me And this like still blows my mind because I was an art kid from jump. I was in music, I was in dance, dance sort of. I was in like ice skating, I was in like all that kind of stuff.
Wow, we
Performance,
really do have
voice.
so many parallels.
Yeah.
So
I
many.
was on stage, I was in theater, I was
Yeah.
probably more performing arts than visual arts, but I was also at the University of Illinois doing art classes on Saturdays and took ceramics, took like stuff outside of school, did art all the way through high school. Went to art and design school. We had to take 9 drawing classes and a couple painting classes and just shitloads of all that stuff. But what nobody ever really fucking taught me, like if there's one thing that I will teach my daughter about art, is you just got to do it, and you got to do it so much that you find your thing. You find the thing that lights you up. You find the medium. You find the brand of pencil and the type of paper. Like I was addicted to buying art supplies, but like actually sitting down and using them, actually like because it's a putting yourself out there thing, you know. So like the visual art to me,
you're revealing yourself.
Yeah, putting yourself out at your talent level. I wasn't really willing to be a beginner as long as you were a beginner in visual arts. You're a beginner in visual arts for so long, so painstakingly long. And I was taught as a child that you were supposed to have natural talent. And I knew people with a lot of natural visual art talent. Yeah. That could put pen to paper and do realistic drawings and do realistic painting very young. And it was kind of, you either got it or you don't. And that's a lie.
Oh, and it is a lie. I mean,
it's a complete lie.
Will say, I feel like I was born with a lot of natural talent. Like I just have a natural eye, but I also worked my ass off to like paint and figure out what I liked and what tools I like. Like you said, it's not like I just sat on my ass and was able to like make a masterpiece. So I did have a lot of natural talent, but it doesn't mean that I didn't do anything.
And sometimes natural talent is just natural interest.
Right.
Yes. Like you got to have the want to.
Totally. And like where your attention is being placed and like what you're putting your nose in, you just.
Yeah, I knew people who could just naturally sit down and do something amazing and they were completely bored by it and they had no interest in cultivating that and really
frustrating.
So frustrating. Yeah.
It's like I want to do that and you're just good at it and then you don't.
Yeah. A college friend of mine like just flushed his whole career down the tubes, like partying. And I was like, the talent that I see in you is just unbelievable. And you know, you don't see it, you don't feel it. It doesn't mean anything to you because you didn't work for it. And so I kind of like realized at some age, pretty young, I'm not that natural of an artist that I think I can just go straight mainline art career. Like I decided that very young. And that was partly because of the lid that had been put on me in terms of like, it should just be natural. You know, I grew up in a family where we did have people who were just like really fucking naturally good at things that were creative, music especially, and writing. And so like, well, if I don't have that level of something, I should definitely not even try to pursue it, which is also a lie.
Wow, interesting. Yeah,
but
such a lie.
But in junior high, I really was like, okay, interior design is a field that it's a practice, which all art is. Architecture, interior design, they're called practices. And they're called practices because every project is extremely different. You are always in a high learning curve. And you'll never encounter the same thing twice. Space is also never done, which is something that is very frustrating for a perfectionist. Absolutely never done. As soon as you think it's done, a pipe breaks. And
then you have to do it all over again.
It all gets floated out the road.
Yeah.
So I decided on that career very early. And I like very much gunning for like, I will do this thing that I thought had a lot of glamour to it, which it is not. One of my first mentors out of college said to me, interior designers are the best dressed poor people you will ever meet. And I was like, I'm so screwed because that describes me very well.
You're like, damn, you just nailed the shit out of me.
Yeah, loved to shop back then. I hate it now, but I loved to shop back then. I was was a well-dressed, very poor person.
That is hilarious.
And I didn't want to stay that way. The more I got into the architecture community and the way people, the mentality in the architecture community is one of martyrdom. I'll just say it. There are a lot of martyrs in the architecture community. I don't know why. I've never quite put my finger on it.
It's really embedded in the culture, I think, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, and then in religion.
It's embedded in a lot of things. And architecture is the
Motherhood.
second. Yeah, absolutely. It's the second longest hours spent outside the classroom next to med school. So in college, architecture. So in college, you are spending the most amount of hours possible in the studio, on classwork, on schoolwork, overnights, like working yourself to the bone.
Wow.
It's expected. It's part of the culture, like med school. But med school gets paid for that eventually.
Right.
And architecture doesn't. And so that culture keeps up where it's extremely long hours for not a lot of pay. And it obviously attracts big egos is what it's known for. But like, I wouldn't even say that's the issue. I would say that like they don't value their time because of how that culture is set up. And then their clients don't value their time because they don't value their time.
Right. Yep. I know how that.
And I just wasn't willing to stay in a space where my time wasn't valued. And I ended up in a corporate role that was not in an architecture firm, which was the best thing that could have happened to me. And I got a lot of autonomy to design and project manage a lot of different types of spaces for a lot of different types of people. And I loved it. I had a lot of really cool experiences doing and working with other designers, which then brings us here.
Yeah.
Before that was in a very small architecture firm. And I was also in a commercial office furnishings firm. So you're designing cubicles, which is depressing in itself.
Designing cubicles. How many ways are there to design a square?
Thousands. Thousands
Wild.
of ways.
Wild.
Yep.
Well, I don't think that brings us current because like I also want to I think hear more about like your transition like out of Nike and then into more of like motherhood and like your unique creations.
Yeah, like my expression.
Yeah.
So I started while I was at Nike because in 9 years, I got reorged 8 times. So there were times when I would get put in positions I wanted, and then there were times that I absolutely didn't. And so I would go in and out of these cycles of get to work with people I really wanted to work with and for, and then I would work doing work that I really wanted to do. But it was like one or the other. It wasn't both.
Damn.
And I just was weary, the instability and not knowing what was next and not being able to choose my own path was getting really tiring. And I had already started working on a grocery store concept called Squirrel Gather Daily. And she still exists and lives and breathes. And I think about her all the time, but she's very much on hold. But I was about to quit Nike to I had money saved up and I was just going to fully jump off the cliff and
into Squirrel.
Do my concept. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
I had a couple guys that were interested in investing and they were restaurant owners and like franchise experts and like things were like building some momentum and it felt really good. And obviously like when COVID hit, it was just I can't open a retail location. How would I do that right now? And there was so much uncertainty. We were wiping down our groceries. So I stayed. And when reviews came around, I did not have any give a fuck left in me. And I was a director at that point. Like I was making really good money. And I liked my boss. I liked my team, but I did not care for the work that I was currently doing. And my boss was like, people want to see you lead more. People want to see you in more exposure type roles. They want to hear from you more. And I was like, I'm not going to do that here.
Yeah, I don't really want to do that.
And I told him that. I was like, I hear you. And I have told you guys, like, I want to lead in these ways. And those opportunities haven't been available to me. So
yeah,
I appreciate it and no. And I knew layoffs were coming. And I was like, if there's a way to put my hand up for that, I would like to.
Please choose me to lay me off.
And I told his boss that as well. And I was very candid. Something about too working from home at that point. I'd been working from home for March to I think that was August.
Yeah.
So working from home 4 or 5 months. And like, when you're going into the office every day, you can kind of put on that facade every day and like, put on that front. I would listen to my like spiritual coaches all the way to work and like, meditate an hour before to get the gumption to go into the office every day prior to I would often take car naps in the afternoon to get through the day. Then realizing this is taking so much of my life force just to show up. That when we're home for 5 months and you don't have to do that anymore. When you're getting on something like this, where you're on a screen with somebody, it's really hard to lie anymore. It's really hard to be like, yeah, I will totally continue to pretend to care about this. And I was doing Perry's work and I would, in all these portals, in my relationship for real. So then, when layoffs came in October, like we just moved to Hawaii and I started what I call my first retirement. So I was in Hawaii with the love of my life. We're basically on a 9-month honeymoon in Hawaii. He was still working and that's how we got to go, is he knew he had a position. So we decided to go on that knowing that he had a position. So I was like, either I'll continue to work on Squirrel and then launch that when COVID does whatever COVID does, thinking it would be over in a year, right? We all kind of thought that. And
psych.
Yeah. Then I was working with Perry and like she was like, why don't you, make an offer about coaching? Because like had a couple people come to me like for like life advice in that winter and be like, how did you kind of set up your life the way you've set it up? I see what you're doing here and I'm like wanting to be in a similar place. And I was like, well, I'm, thinking about coaching.
Yeah.
And
you do, it like comes out naturally for you too.
Yeah, I really, really love it.
Yeah.
And I worked with those 2 particular clients for 2.5 years or something. Like I worked with each of them for a really long time. And I was also really working on my body, like really working on my relationship with my body, which is a whole different type of creation, right? Stop drinking. I had drank heavily for 20 years. That's like a whole piece of writing that hasn't happened yet. But my work with Perry, I kind of was working with Perry in her business course because I think I still wanted some permission to do Squirrel the way I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
I really still was not sure if feminine-led business could work. Like when we talk about feminine energy, when we talk about feminine-led, we're talking about not grinding. We were just talking about not pushing.
Yep.
Prioritizing our health, prioritizing family, prioritizing our creative lives and well-being, and also prioritizing what needs to die. A lot of people get in, we talked about the niche thing, right? Like niche, the same thing? Whatever.
I think they're the same thing.
Prioritizing the growth and something that I've always
and
like
the
in
decay.
my own and the decay, prioritizing my own freedom. Like freedom is bastardized in the US. What true personal freedom means is that you don't have anything that holds you back from who you really are.
Yeah. Amen.
You don't have any person that does that. You don't have a lack of boundaries that does that. You don't have
a belief system.
Like
a job.
You don't have finances that do that. Like all these chains that we put on ourselves throughout our whole lives. Like I was in like really, really strong pursuit of like complete freedom from all of that.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, like you choose responsibilities. Like it doesn't mean that you
do whatever the fun.
Right. Like, that's not it. But when you do choose those responsibilities, you're fully responsible for those choices too.
Right.
And you're not victimized
and it's
by them.
also that you chose them from a sovereign place, not because of who you think you have to be or what someone expects of you or what society thinks you should do. It's your choice.
Yes.
Yeah.
The what society thinks you should do, or what your parents think you should do, or what your culture thinks you should do. Like, those are probably the three biggest killers of freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you, I wanted to do this with my career, but my dad wanted me to do X, Y, and Z. Which to us now sounds silly because we're just so far away from that. But most people are still in that.
Yeah.
Most people
I mean, I get it, but even when I decided to like still do my own thing regardless, it still had a mental hold on me for a while. Like,
sure.
That kind of stuff kind of sticks with you until you really address that, right? And get free from that.
But your mental, like, the freedom comes from your own emotional and spiritual and mental work to free yourself from those beliefs that are lodged in there by those people and cultures.
Right. Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I'm still very much on the path, right? Like, I always knew I wanted to be a mother. Yeah, we're always on the path. I don't feel fully creatively expressed because I don't have time now. I always wanted to be a mother, always, 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 always. And one of the hardest parts about being a mother is that lack of creative drifting time. That full Saturday to like paint a little, draw a little, write a little, read a little, makes food, like just meander your way through the day, right? And the closest thing now to that is like she and I playing and reading books and
hell yeah, I love
drawing with crayons and hanging up laundry in the yard, and that would be my day to day. But it still has to have some structure because that's what she needs, and it still has to have, you know, a lot more cleaning than I ever wanted to be doing. to make sure that you have, and Heather and I talk about this all the time, creation is a need. And to make sure that that need gets met is very difficult as a parent.
Yeah.
As a parent of young children, I think it gets easier and easier over time.
Yeah.
But just surrendering to it and being like, okay, now I have 5 minutes while she's on the playground within arm's reach where I can journal on my phone for 5 minutes. Like, I do that. Or when she was younger and napping on me, I'd write a post and put it on my blog. Or right now it's 10 p.m. like when I should be going to bed. But these are the times that I get this cup filled, is just little snaps of time that you pull out of nowhere.
Little tiny snippets
little
and
slivers
windows that you can prioritize that.
Yeah. There's a book that I haven't read the whole thing, but I just it's Mothers and Artists. I can't remember the exact title. I'll get it, put it in the notes. But she works at a museum and she was examining her moving into motherhood and how there are very few female painters on the walls, and the ones that are either weren't mothers or they had one child. And you know, it's just something that mothers sacrifice a lot, because having a child is the ultimate creation.
Legitimately.
It just doesn't always feel that way. It doesn't feel that way to your ego. It doesn't feel that way to you know, what you've known your whole life. Like, it doesn't feel that way, but it
yeah, I mean, you literally created a life, and now you're guiding her, creating her environment, listening to her needs and her personality, and investing in her interests, and quite literally creating her life. As you see, I mean, fuck, moving to Amsterdam and like creating a life with Chris, and like how, you know, creating a home environment that you want for her and for all of you. There's so much creativity in that that's required.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's just not what we...
I mean, it's a whole different kind of artistry.
Right. And sadly, it's just not valued by society.
Yeah.
In the way that these other things are. And so that's that's where we get hung up. It's like, well, we got to have this, we got to have something else that's commercially viable in order to feel creative, which obviously isn't.
Tangible.
Yeah. And
something
even
that
the
people can buy.
momfluencers, right? I mean, they have created a brand out of their momming.
Yeah. Yep.
And like, what an interesting concept that is,
I
right?
guess I wouldn't call that interesting, really. It would be like, I don't know about that. I mean, I have some
What I
personal
think is
feelings about that.
interesting about it, what I think of is interesting about it is that like all these homesteading, homeschooling moms that you see on Instagram.
Mm.
My parents were that. Like they moved out of cities and they bought 6 acres and they had an organic garden and they did that.
Yeah.
And homeschooled. There was no Instagram then. I honestly think it would have been a good outlet for them because they actually need that. They are both people that they really like to be seen in their creativity.
Gotcha.
It was very isolating to be out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so that
Right. So
idea of
they
like,
didn't have the opportunities to be seen that we do today.
yeah. So I think it's an interesting like form of creativity. I think it kind of goes sideways sometimes when people are their ego takes it over and they like,
Yeah, that's definitely what I was pointing to. I'm like,
yeah, yeah, and they're exploiting their kids or whatever.
yeah,
Right? Like there are
yeah,
things that
exactly.
like take it not in a good direction, but I
Yeah.
think if you are doing it from like a very pure place, and there are people that I follow that are sleep experts, like people who really understand child and baby sleep and help other people with that. Like they showcase their lives some, and it does feel like a really good creative outlet for that. Like they're creating
Totally.
content that's really helpful to other moms. There's small exercise moms like
Yeah.
focus on postpartum healing and things like that that are really
Totally.
interesting.
I mean, and I do think that you would have a lot to give after this kind of period over of you experimenting and committing to this style of parenting that you want. I do think that you have a lot of medicine to share there.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Well, we've made it an hour and 5 minutes already. I know. So
Time flies between you and I, that's for sure.
it always does. Ooh, how should we close this? I think I obviously want to direct people to Jumping Bean website to learn more about the actual organization, and we can talk more about that next time. It just felt like this would be more interesting to talk
Well,
about
yeah,
our
I mean, you get to know the
journeys
people who are creating this
behind it.
podcast and behind it.
Yeah.
I agree.
And the reason it exists, right?
Mhm.
But direct people there. And I also like want to tease that we're gonna have members on. And we have a nice long list of themes and topics that we're going to be diving into around creative blocks, creative need, like the creative journey, the struggles. Is there anything else that you want to the ending of this episode?
I guess to me, it just feels like a very beautiful kind of jumping off point, like where you and I have been, and then where we're going, and I think that just feels really good. I just think
I
it
completely
feels
agree.
good to be here and do this and really start having these conversations out.
Yes.
Or,
Yes. I agree.
Yeah.
And to invite people into them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm super excited to have like the members on this and talk about like things from different perspectives. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And hear about people's experiences, especially now, because I do know that right now it's a pretty tough time in the corporate, commercial, creative world. And just have like this place where people can come talk about their experiences and maybe open up some possibilities of other ways to pay bills during these kinds of times, because creativity is always valued and art is always needed and has always been throughout the history of humanity.
Yep.
And always will be.
That's going to be a mind fuck to some of the creatives out there. Is valued? What? But yeah, it is. I mean, you travel to like places like Italy and France, and it's their whole culture is set up around art. That is their whole entire history is, the Madonna and the buildings and then you look at the world and it's everywhere you look, there is art. Someone designed this house. Someone created, like, you listen to music all day. There's art everywhere, and
Yeah.
people who are making a killing, like actors, and it's just like it's everywhere, and it's not always very obvious if you are kind
And
of
money is
looking.
everywhere.
And money is everywhere, right? And like there are many artists getting paid millions of dollars for like
Yeah.
what they create, you know. And it's like, to the struggling artist, that's really hard to see, or you can get outside of your own head about. But it's true.
Yes. It's very true.
Creativity is a really important foundation to being alive.
Yeah. And being willing to express that creativity. And I think that's one of our missions, both Jumping Bean and this podcast, is aiding and assisting and supporting people in their creative expression.
Yay.
All right. Here we go.
We'll see you on the next.
Goodbye, y'all.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you are looking for more information about the Jumping Bean Magic Collective, please visit us at our website, www.jumpingbeanmagiccollective.com. There, you can become a member, reach out with questions, or become a design client. You may also find us on Instagram and Threads. If you enjoyed listening, please rate the show. See you next time.